I know I say it literally every time that, oh, this is going to be messy and I have no idea what I'm talking about. I kind of really don't. And I already deleted a really good take, and I hated it, and I hate myself for that, but whatever. Sports are awesome. Sports are incredible. Sports are one of the greatest sort of inventions of human society. Sports are sports of human leisure, of competition, of human expression, I think, just across the board. More than this, sports are one of the greatest methods human beings have found to tell their stories. It's a huge part of why I do what I do, right? The whole media and broadcasting type of stuff is for the narrative. It's for the romance, as they say, of sports. The stories of struggle, of underdogs, the stories of dominant, immovable forces, the stories of the pinnacle of human ability and ambition and what have you. And I think that this romance, this storytelling is really cranked up to 11 in motorsports. And there's many factors for that. First and foremost, the fact that the human being is outsourcing half their effort to a machine, right? But not just some robot, a machine that the human being physically and spiritually needs to become one with. A machine that the human is symbiotic with. A machine that pushes the human to their absolute limit in the same way that the human is pushing the machine. And it's when you put 20, 30, 40 of these pseudo-cyborgs on a racetrack and tell them to give it their all, that's where absolute magic happens. But for as beautiful as it has been, as it can be, as it still is, I feel like some of that magic's fading. And I'm not talking about my personal interest. I'm talking about the racing world as a whole. Motorsports as a whole, the entire industry, somewhat at least, seems to be pushing towards this singularity of sorts. And there's a lot of things that play into that. There's financial and economic motivators. There's the the talent pipeline and trying to basically factory produce some of these kids to drive some of these cars. But above all, I think technological development. The cops are trolling me. Above all, I think the technological development, just in and of itself, is probably the greatest contributor to this. For the last 20 to 25 years, it's just become too predictable, a lot of the time. The championships and the series that take themselves seriously, that have, in theory, the fairest systems in place, have all been trending in the direction of just being dominated. Formula One's kind of the typical example, right? There tends to be periods of dominance, and that spans back a long time, but most recently, again, 2000 onward, you have Michael win his 5. That was crazy. Then things were competitive for a couple of years, and then Sebastian Vettel wins 4 in a row. And then Mercedes wins 7 in a row. And then Max wins 4 in a row. And then the off year with McLaren, one of the Mercedes drivers is going to win this year most likely, and we'll see what happens. But I mean, seriously, think about how crazy that is. That's 15 years straight that 2 teams and their drivers win the world championship. And in these very long, it's not a back and forth. It's these very long spurts, these very long periods of just one top guy. Except for you, Nico. I'm not as familiar with the World Endurance Championship, but thinking back to stuff I've looked into, you had Porsche and Audi just being the only people to win stuff forever. And Porsche's still kind of kicking everyone's butt, even nowadays they're a perpetual top contender. Most recently, Alex Palou. Oh my gosh, that guy can't stop winning. It's the best driver with the best crew, with the best team, and they're killing it in a spec series. IndyCar's a spec series, right? Theoretically at least, there shouldn't be one guy slaughtering the field, but here he is. He could win the championship this weekend in DC, which I'm going to go to. I'm going to be at the Freedom 250, which I'm super excited for. But that's like what, 3-4 races early? I mean, really, NASCAR is the only major series that I can think of, at least, that isn't like this. But that's because their championship sucks. Their format has been terrible. They used one of the worst championship formats out of, I think, any sport ever for 10 years straight, a little over 10 years. And they've reverted back to another gimmicky system that they used before that. It's better, but it's still not full season points. That's how literally every other racing series is determined. Except for maybe supercars, they're doing something weird, but I don't know enough about it. Or at minimum, if we're not focusing on particular teams and drivers winning everything for a couple years straight, then we can at least focus on the haves and the have-nots, right? In Formula One in particular, there is never going to be a lower tier team that develops from behind and builds a race-winning car within like a single set of regulations, right? The only people that can win races anymore are McLaren, Ferrari, Red Bull, Mercedes. And I have a feeling it's going to stay that way for the next while. I don't think there's going to be some freak Racing Bull or Alpine win anymore. We had that around 2020, 2021. We had these strange one-offs. But that's honestly past. The technological capability of the top teams and how they develop cars and what they can do with a given rule set is simply, it's so far exceeded what other teams are capable of. And there's not going to be any change to that. There's not going to be any change short term within a season. Like, the Haas isn't going to become a podium placer, nor is it going to be one in 3, 4, 5 years. IndyCar side is looking a little more hopeful, I guess, if you want things to be competitive, right? That's going to be more personnel-based, who can hire Palou and then who can hire the right people to support Palou. Because IndyCar seems to be desperately trying to strip any areas of technological development. So they're kind of the only people running counter to this, but when does that become almost like interference from the sanctioning body, I realized I'm rambling, but my point in laying out all these examples is that it's just growing less and less and less and less and less competitive. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Dominance is fine. Dominance is a hallmark of sports. You're going to have your titans of history. You're going to have your Schumacher 5 championships in a row. You're going to have the New York Yankees. You're going to have the Pats, right? Like, these are things that are going to exist. You're going to have your current LA Dodgers. Goodness gracious, wow. Imagine sacrificing an entire season for a three-peat. Wow, that's brutal. And speaking of that, right, there's a way in which legitimately this stuff is reaching into, regular sports or stick and ball sports. This sort of everything converges on one dynasty and then another dynasty and then another dynasty. For everything except the NBA, there's been the extremely dominant teams in the past few years, right? We had the twin Florida dynasties in the NHL. We had again, the Dodgers, like we said. We had the Chiefs. Then there's college sports, right? That's been really controversial the past 2-3 years. Everything's so laissez-faire that it's become basically its own minor professional league, right? Whatever teams can cough up the most, or whatever schools rather can cough up the most money in brand deals and just amass talent. It's not even that it makes particular teams that good. It's just that it robs, not so phenomenal. It robs smaller schools of actual talent, or like mid-tier, teams of having anything to build off of, right? And so everything is gonna just floats upward. And I'm not saying all of this to say, everything is becoming unfair and that we need maximum fairness, right? Fair competition is a given, but there's going to be winners and there's going to be losers, right? And that's just how this works. And if that's not all on the field, if that's just the forces of, technological power, monetary power in the background, then so be it, right? My problem is when does trying to conjure up a story in this kind of environment become completely fake? At what point does it become made up, right? At what point is there so little to discuss, so little to promote because of simple dominance, that we're just making up stories? And this isn't purely hypothetical. Independent Formula One media sucks. Half of it's just clickbait AI-generated articles about non-issues, non-stories, just making things up, communicating in very confusing terms, very obvious things that have already happened, be it on track or whatever, elsewhere. Turning a small detail or a small happening into something it really isn't. I'm just concerned. I'm concerned for how much we're going to have to lie to ourselves and how much we might have to lie to other people, right? Will we ever accept that nothing's really happening? That same team, same driver, whatever. The same people we always knew were going to win are winning. When will we be forced to admit that the romance is gone? Will that day ever come? Is this all just being melodramatic? It's worth considering.